What would you do if someone publicly humiliated your mother, called her cheap because she sews for a living instead of sitting on charity boards? Now, what would you do if you had the power to destroy that person's entire empire, but tradition said you had to stay quiet for 3 more weeks while they kept attacking you? That's the choice Menza faced after walking out of the most talked-about wedding in Accra. And while the Sarpong family celebrated running off the girl who didn't belong, they made one catastrophic mistake. They never asked who she really was. This is the story of what happens when old money meets older power, when Kempinski ballrooms collide with Aquapem Ridge Protocol, when the woman you dismiss as nobody turns out to be the only person standing between you and financial ruin.
African Karma Stories.
The champagne flute hits the marble floor at exactly the wrong moment, right when the live band pauses between songs, right when 200 guests have their phones half raised for the cake cutting, right when silence is the cruelest amplifier. The sound cracks through the Kempinski Hotel Gold Coast City Ballroom like a gunshot. Every head turns, not toward the broken glass, but toward the woman standing 3 feet away from it, her spine straight, her face calm, her mother's hand steady in hers. Menza doesn't flinch. She's learned that much in 28 years, how to hold yourself together when the room decides you don't belong. The flute didn't slip from her hand. It was nudged, gently, deliberately, by Akosua Sarpong, mother of the groom's best man, architect of tonight's humiliation, and soon-to-be in-law if Ama had stayed silent 1 more month. But she didn't. And now the entire ballroom, draped in gold organza, flooded with imported roses, thick with the perfume of old money and new pretension, holds its breath. Such a shame, Akosua murmurs, loud enough for the nearest 3 tables to hear. Her smile is porcelain, her kaba is Italian lace. Her words are surgical. I suppose not everyone is used to holding fine crystal. It's different from the markets, isn't it? The markets, Makola Market to be specific, where Ama's mother, Abena, runs a sewing shop off Kojo Thompson Road, where she's spent 30 years stitching school uniforms, funeral cloths, and Sunday bests for families who pay in installments and mobile money transfers, where dignity smells like fabric dye and engine exhaust, not French perfume. Akosua doesn't say Makola out loud. She doesn't have to. The guests know the code. East Legon versus everywhere else. Trasakum Estate versus Trotro. Them versus us. Kojo, tall, lean, apologetic Kojo, stands 4 feet away, frozen between his mother and his girlfriend. His tuxedo is perfect. His silence is damning. Ama watches him calculate. She sees it in his eyes, the math of reputation, the weight of family expectation, the cost of choosing her in front of everyone who matters to his world. He opens his mouth, closes it, looks at his father, Kwesi Sarpong, whose face is stone, whose empire is built on perception and proximity to power. Ahmad doesn't wait for Kojo to find his voice. She's done waiting. She bends, carefully, and picks up a single shard of glass, not to clean, to mark the moment. Then she looks at Akosua, not with anger, but with something quieter and far more unsettling. Clarity. Thank you for the evening, Ama says, her voice low and firm. But my mother and I will be leaving now. Abena doesn't ask why. She simply gathers her purse, a modest leather bag she saved 3 months to buy, and stands. Her kaba and slit are hand-stitched, vibrant, beautiful, and according to this room, not enough. She loops her arm through her daughter's, and together they walk toward the ballroom doors. No stumbling, no tears, no theater. Behind them the whispers start like wildfire. Phones dip and rise. A few guests pretend to check messages while recording. The band fumbles into a jazz standard, trying to drown the discomfort. Akosua accepts a napkin from a server, dabbing out a champagne splash that isn't there. Kwesi signals to someone near the exit, a subtle gesture that will become a phone call, then a narrative, then a campaign. Kojo finally moves, 3 steps toward the door. Then his father's hand lands on his shoulder, a silent command disguised as affection. Kojo stops, and that's when Ama knows. This isn't just about a ruined reception. This is about a line she can't uncross, a truth she can't yet speak, and a clock that just started ticking toward a reckoning far beyond Accra's glittering skyline. Outside, the hotel's driveway smells like rain and roasted plantain from a street vendor 2 blocks down. Abena flags a taxi. Ama glances back once through the glass walls of the ballroom and sees Kojo still standing there, small and silent under the chandeliers. She turns away. There are things more important than love, things older than this city's appetite for scandal, things waiting for her on a ridge an hour north, where the roads narrow and the air holds secrets tighter than any Accra ballroom ever could.
Morning in Makola doesn't wait for you to be ready. By 6 a.m., the market is already a living organism, vendors shouting prices, trotro mates hanging from door frames calling destinations, the smell of kelawele frying in giant pans, mixing with diesel fumes and yesterday's rain evaporating off concrete. This is Ama's Accra, not the one with Swedish coffee shops on Oxford Street or rooftop bars overlooking the Atlantic. This is the Accra that feeds the city, clothes it, moves it from point A to point B on fraying patience and relentless hustle. Ama stands in her mother's shop, a narrow space between a provisions store and a phone repair kiosk, pinning fabric to a dressmaker's dummy. Her hands move with the confidence of someone who's been doing this since she was tall enough to reach the cutting table. Abina sits at her sewing machine, foot pedal pumping, needle racing through azure cotton meant for a naming ceremony next week. Neither of them mentions last night. Not yet. The work comes first. It always does. Uncle Dan called. Abina says without looking up. He says it's time. Ama pauses, pins between her lips. Time. The word carries weight in their family. Not calendar time, ceremonial time, obligation time, the kind of time that runs on tradition and can't be postponed just because your boyfriend's mother humiliated you in front of Accra's so-called elite. She nods, removing the pins carefully. I know. Across the city, in a gated estate off Tresako Valley, Kojo Sarpong sits in his bedroom staring at his phone. 3 unsent text messages sit in drafts. I'm sorry feels hollow. I should have said something feels late. Can we talk feels presumptuous after watching her walk away while he stood there like furniture. His driver texts, "Ready when you are, boss." Kojo looks at the message, at the luxury his silence bought him, and feels sick. His mother is downstairs having breakfast on the terrace. Fresh papaya, Greek yogurt, imported granola. Already on the phone with her sister, rewriting last night into a story where Ama caused a scene and showed her true colors. Akosua is good at this. She spent 30 years turning her husband's business wins into social capital, transforming money into legacy, making sure everyone knows the Sarpongs don't just have wealth, they have taste, connections, and standards. Standards Ama apparently didn't meet. But standards are funny things in Accra. They shift depending on where you stand. In East Legon and Airport Residential, they're about European vacations and which international school your children attend. In Makola, they're about showing up when you say you will, paying your debts, and remembering where you came from. Amma lives between both worlds, belonging fully to neither. And until last night, she'd managed to navigate that impossible balance with grace. Her phone buzzes. Not Kojo. Uncle Dan again. The Queen Mother wants to see you before Odwira. Do not delay. Amma shows the text to her mother. Abina nods, scissors still moving through fabric, her face unreadable. Your silence is not weakness. It's protection. Theirs and yours. Amma knows this. She's known it for 3 years. Since her grandmother's passing, since the elders arrived at their door with news that changed everything. But knowing something and living it are different animals. Especially when the man you thought you loved couldn't find his voice when it mattered most. On Independence Avenue, a billboard advertises the Sarpong's latest development, Ridgeview Residences, where luxury meets legacy. The irony isn't lost on anyone who knows what's coming. Kwesi Sarpong built his empire on land deals, connections, and an uncanny ability to be in the right room when permits get approved. But land in Ghana, especially land near traditional areas, comes with histories that can't be bulldozed. And sometimes the people you dismiss in ballrooms are the same people who hold the keys to your next big project. Amma folds the finished piece, sets it aside, and looks out at the organized chaos of the market. Somewhere in this city, Kojo is probably rehearsing another apology. Somewhere in East Legon, his mother is already planning damage control. And somewhere on the Aquapem Ridge, elders are preparing for a transition that will ripple far beyond the palace walls. Amma replies to Uncle Dan, "I'll be there by noon." Her mother doesn't ask if she's ready. In their world, ready is a luxury. You show up, you honor your obligations, you carry what you're given with dignity, even when the city thinks you're just a girl from Makola who couldn't hold a champagne flute.
The Sarpong family home doesn't do casual. Even Sunday brunch is a production. Starched white tablecloths on the terrace, fresh-cut anthuriums in crystal vases, a spread that could feed 20 but serves 4. Kojo sits across from his parents, pushing scrambled eggs around his plate while his phone burns a hole in his pocket. Amma hasn't responded to any of his messages. Not the apology, not the "can we please talk," not even the desperate 3 a.m. "I know I failed you." Just silence, the kind that says more than any argument ever could. Akosa dabs her lips with a linen napkin, her movements precise, performative. "I spoke with Aunt Grace this morning," she announces, as if last night's disaster never happened. "She agrees that perhaps the relationship simply ran its course. Better to discover incompatibility now than later, don't you think?" Kojo's fork stops midair. "Incompatibility?" he repeats, the word bitter on his tongue. "Is that what we're calling public humiliation now?" His father doesn't look up from the Sunday graphic. "Watch your tone, Kojo." "Or what? You'll stand by silently while someone else gets disrespected?" The words are out before Kojo can stop them. His mother's face hardens. His father finally sets down the newspaper, slowly, deliberately, the way he does when a business deal is about to collapse. "Let me be clear," Kwasi says, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years building empires from handshakes and perception. "That young woman was lovely, but lovely doesn't build legacies. Your mother was protecting this family's interests. If you can't see that, you're more naive than I thought." Protecting interests. That's the language Kojo has grown up with. Every dinner, every deal, every relationship filtered through the same question: what does this do for the family name? And for 29 years, he's nodded along, believing that success meant elevation, that distance from struggle was the same as achievement. But last night, watching Amma walk away with more dignity in her silence than his entire family managed in their designer clothes. Something in him cracked, wider than that champagne flute. Akosa leans forward, her voice softening into something she probably thinks is maternal. Darling, you have to understand, these things matter. Background, breeding, the circles people come from. Amma is a sweet girl, truly, but she's unpolished. A project. With the right guidance, some etiquette lessons, a different wardrobe. Stop. Kojo stands, his chair scraping against Italian tile. Just stop. She's not a project. She's a person. A person you humiliated because her mother sews for a living instead of sitting on charity boards. Kojo, sit down, his father commands. But Kojo doesn't sit. He spent his whole life sitting quietly while contracts got signed over people's land, sitting politely while his mother judged everyone who didn't summer abroad, sitting frozen while the woman he loves got treated like a stain on expensive fabric. He's done sitting. I'm going to see her. I'm going to apologize, properly. And if she never speaks to me again, I'll understand why. Akosa's laugh is sharp, incredulous. She won't even take your calls, Kojo, don't you see? She's already moved on, probably back in Makola right now, telling her little friends how she almost married into money. Something in Kojo's expression makes his mother stop. Not anger, worse, pity. For her. You really don't know her at all, and that's the saddest part. He walks back inside, past the housekeeper arranging fresh flowers, past the portraits of his grandparents who built their wealth through timber and cocoa, past the trappings of a success that suddenly feels hollow. In his room, he pulls out the small notebook where Amma once wrote her mother's shop address, her handwriting careful and sure. He doesn't text, doesn't call, just gets his keys and walks past his driver, past the gateman, past the invisible walls that separate his world from hers. Outside, Accra is alive with Sunday sounds. Church bells, vendors selling ice cream, children playing football in the street. Kojo drives toward Wakola, toward an apology he should have made last night, toward a woman's whose silence might be the most honest thing anyone has ever given him. Behind him, on the Sarpong Terrace, Akosa dials a number. Yes, hello, this is Mrs. Sarpong. I need to speak with someone about a feature story, something about modern relationships and cultural compatibility. I think our family's perspective would be valuable. The narrative machine starts spinning, crafting a version of events where they're the victims of social climbing, where their standards are virtues, and cruelty is just honesty wrapped in good intentions. But narratives only work when everyone agrees on the story. And somewhere on a ridge north of the city, preparations are underway for a ceremony that will rewrite everything Accra thinks it knows about a girl from Makola who couldn't hold her tongue or a champagne flute when it mattered most.
The road to Adukrom climbs. Not dramatically, this isn't cinematic mountain terrain, but steadily, persistently, the way tradition climbs through generations. Amma watches Accra shrink in the rearview mirror of Uncle Dan's aging Corolla, the city's noise fading into something older, quieter, heavier with memory. By the time they reach the town, the air smells different, less exhaust, more earth, the faint sweetness of cocoa drying on roadside racks. The palace isn't what outsiders expect. No gold-leafed gates or security details. Just a compound of whitewashed buildings arranged around a central courtyard where ancient kola nut trees provide shade and chickens scratch in the red dirt. This is where power lives when it's not performing for cameras, when it's rooted in soil and ceremony, in obligations that predate independence, in systems that have survived colonialism, coups, and the relentless appetite of modernity. Nana Yanyarko II sits under the largest tree, 73 years old and sharp as the morning. She wears a simple cloth, no crown. Those are for public festivals. And her eyes assess Amma the way you'd examine fabric before cutting. "You're late," she says, not unkindly. "But you're here. That's what matters." Amma kneels in greeting, the traditional way, forehead nearly touching the ground. When she rises, the Queen Mother gestures to the stool beside her. Not the ceremonial one. That comes later. This is just wood, worn smooth by decades of difficult conversations. "Tell me what happened in Accra," Nanaya says. Amma does. Not the emotional parts, those are hers to carry, but the facts, the insult, the silence, the walking away. When she finishes, the Queen Mother nods slowly. "And the young man? The one whose family thinks money can buy respect?" Amma says, "He didn't defend me." Will he try to fix it? Probably, when it's convenient. Nanaya makes a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Men often confuse regret with courage. She pauses, studying Amma's face. "But that's not why you're here. You're here because Odwira is 3 weeks away, and after that, everything changes. Everything." The word hangs in the humid air. Amma has known this was coming since her grandmother died 3 years ago, since the kingmakers arrived at her mother's shop with news that rewrote her entire future. She is next in line, not by choice, but by bloodline, by tradition, by a system that doesn't care if you'd rather run an NGO or marry a boy from East Legon. The stool chooses. You answer. "Tell me you understand what silence means. Before installment, you carry the knowledge privately. You prepare privately. You do not announce. You do not explain. You do not defend yourself with truths you're not yet authorized to speak. This is protection for the stool, for the process, for you." Amma nods. She's heard this before, but hearing and living are different countries. Uncle Dan approaches with a tall man in his 50s, Mr. Osei, legal advisor for the Office of Administrator of Stool Lands. He carries a weathered briefcase and the quiet authority of someone who spends his days translating tradition into law. "Mrs. Mensah," he greets her formally. "I trust your mother as well." They sit, and Mr. Osei spreads documents across a wooden table carried out by a young attendant. Maps, revenue reports, concession agreements. You need to understand what you're inheriting. The stool doesn't just hold ceremonial power. It manages lands, cocoa farms, timber lots, and increasingly, parcels that developers want for residential projects. He points to a section of map highlighting the ridge overlooking Accra. This area generates income through the OASL framework. Revenues support schools, boreholes, and community infrastructure. But it also means you'll face pressure. Developers, politicians, people who see land as commodity, not heritage. "People like the Sarpongs," Uncle Dan adds quietly. Amma's head snaps up. "What?" Mr. Osei pulls out another document, a proposal submitted 6 months ago by Sarpong Properties Limited for Ridgeview Residences Phase 2, requesting parcels that technically fall under stool jurisdiction pending review. "It's in early assessment," he explains. "Nothing approved yet. But they've been persistent." The pieces fall into place with sickening clarity. Kojo probably doesn't even know. His father does. And his mother, the woman who called Amma unpolished, a project, someone from the markets, has been circling land that Amma's lineage has stewarded for generations. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amma asks. "Because you weren't ready to know," Nanaya says firmly. "And because until installment, you have no official standing to act. You can only prepare, learn, wait." Wait, while Akram mocks her, while Kojo sends useless apologies, while his family builds narratives and files proposals on land they think is just dirt and opportunity. "How much longer?" Amma asks. 3 weeks, the Queen Mother says. "After Odwira, You'll be installed. After that, you speak with full authority. Until then, I stay silent, Amma finishes. You stay strategic, Naniak corrects. There's a difference.
By Monday morning, the Kempinski incident isn't just gossip, it's content. 3 separate Instagram accounts have posted about the wedding walkout, each with slightly different angles but the same underlying message. Girl from nowhere tried to climb, got checked, left in shame. The photos are carefully curated. Amma mid-stride toward the exit, her face unreadable. Akosua accepting sympathy from a friend, hand delicately pressed to her chest. Kojo standing frozen, looking appropriately conflicted. No context, just images that tell the story Accra wants to hear. By noon, the hashtag #KnowYourPlace is trending in Ghana. Not because anyone explicitly connected it to Amma, that would be too obvious, but because someone influential quote-tweeted a lifestyle blogger's hot tech. Some people are so desperate to sit at tables they weren't invited to, they forget how to hold the silverware. The comments section becomes a battlefield. Half the replies praise maintaining standards. The other half calls it classist nonsense. Nobody knows the full story. Everyone has an opinion. Amma sees it all from her mother's shop. Her phone buzzes every 3 minutes. Screenshots from concerned friends, think pieces from strangers, DMs from people she vaguely knew in secondary school suddenly offering unsolicited advice about handling public embarrassment. She turns off notifications and goes back to hemming a customer's dress. But the noise doesn't stop just because you stop listening. On Peace FM's morning show, 2 hosts debate the cultural implications of the incident. Look, I'm not saying everyone needs to marry within their class, one host ventures carefully, but there's something to be said for shared values, shared upbringing. When the gap is too wide, someone always gets hurt. His co-host counters, but who decides what gap is too wide? Who made these people judges? It's a 15-minute segment that says everything and nothing, that acknowledges class while pretending it's about compatibility, that makes Amma the cautionary tale without ever saying her name. By Wednesday, the Sarpong's version is everywhere. Not through Akosua's mouth directly, she's too savvy for that, but through her network. A friend posts a reflection on social media about teaching our daughters to value substance over status, accompanied by a photo from the wedding where everyone looks elegant and unbothered. A business associate mentions in an interview that young people today sometimes prioritize the wrong things, access over authenticity. The implication is clear. Amma was the social climber. They were the victims of her ambition. Kojo watches it happen from his office at Sarpong Properties, his stomach turning with each new post. He tries calling Amma again, straight to voicemail. He drives to Makola twice. The shop is closed both times. He asks mutual friends for help. They tell him gently, firmly, she doesn't want to talk. And the longer she stays silent, the louder the narrative becomes. Then Salorum Dake enters the picture. He's not a gossip blogger or a radio personality chasing viral moments. He's a journalist who actually does research, land records, corporate filings, the kind of unglamorous work that occasionally produces stories powerful people wish stayed buried. He sends Amma a DM on Thursday. I don't know your full story, and you don't have to share it, but I'm looking into Stool lands management on the Aquapam Ridge, and your name came up in some interesting contexts. If you ever want to talk, on or off the record, I'm listening. Amma reads the message 3 times. Interesting contexts. He knows something. Not maybe everything, but enough to be asking questions. She types and deletes 4 different responses before settling on, "Thank you for reaching out. I'm not ready to speak publicly yet, but I appreciate your approach." Salorum replies immediately, "Understood. For what it's worth, the people loudest about what you supposedly did wrong might want to worry about what they're doing, period. Stay safe." That same evening, Akosua sits in her salon getting her nails done, phone propped against a bottle of topcoat, scrolling through the week's digital carnage with satisfaction. "I think the whole unfortunate situation has died down nicely," she tells her nail technician, who nods because that's what you do when clients monologue. "Some lessons are harder than others, but they're necessary." What Akosua doesn't see, because she's blocked him out of pettiness, is Salorum's latest post. Upcoming series on Stool land stewardship, AOSL regulations, and the quiet battles happening outside Accra's spotlight. Some stories take time to tell right. This one's worth the wait. The post gets modest engagement. 50 likes, a few shares, nothing viral. But in certain circles, legal offices, chieftaincy registries, community advocacy groups, people take note. Because when Salorum Dake announces he's digging, something usually surfaces. And when he ties it to Stool lands and the ridge, anyone with pending proposals starts making calls. Kwesi Sarpong is in a meeting when his assistant interrupts with a printout of Salorum's post. He reads it once, expression unchanging, then asks his legal team a simple question. Do we have any exposure on the ridge filings? Nothing unusual, standard proposals, all above board. Keep it that way. But his jaw tightens just slightly, the way it does when variables he can't control enter the equation.
The email arrives at Sarpong Properties on a Friday afternoon when most people are already mentally checked out for the weekend. Subject line, Ridgeview Residences Phase 2, Partnership Reconsideration. Kwesi's executive assistant flags it urgent and forwards it to his phone while he's stuck in traffic on the Spintex Road, AC blasting against the heat, radio playing old highlife. He reads it twice before calling his lawyer. Republic Capital Partners, a respected private equity firm that was supposed to co-finance the Ridge development, is pulling out. Not pausing, not renegotiating terms, withdrawing entirely. The language is professional, almost apologetic, but the message is clear. After conducting enhanced due diligence on community stakeholder sentiment and reviewing our ESG compliance framework, we have determined that proceeding at this time would not align with our institutional values and risk appetite. ESG: Environmental, Social, and Governance. The corporate phrase that means, we did our homework and something doesn't smell right. Kwesi sits in traffic, phone pressed to his ear, while his lawyer tries to sound reassuring. It's probably just cold feet. Big firms get nervous about anything that touches traditional land. We can find other financing. We're 3 weeks from breaking ground, Kwesi says flatly. Materials are ordered. Contractors are lined up. We don't have time for other financing. What neither of them says out loud but both understand, in Accra's development world, when one respected firm walks away citing values, others start asking questions. Money is curious. Money talks to other money. And when money gets nervous, it moves fast, usually away from you. By Monday, the second shoe drops. Not a financing pullout this time, but something quieter and potentially more damaging. Ms. Thelma Osu, from the Office of the Administrator of Stool Lands, issues a brief public statement in response to recent inquiries from media and stakeholders about land allocation processes on the Akwapen Ridge. The statement is bureaucratic, careful, and devastating in its implications. The OASL wishes to clarify that all stool land transactions must follow established protocols, including consultation with traditional authorities, environmental impact assessments, and community benefit agreements. Any suggestions that approvals are granted through informal influence rather than proper process are inconsistent with our mandate. Current proposals under review will be evaluated solely on their merit and compliance with regulations. It's the kind of statement that says nothing and everything. No names, no accusations, just a reminder that shortcuts don't work, that tradition has teeth, and that people who thought they could navigate around proper channels might want to reconsider their strategy. Salorum Dake publishes his first piece that same afternoon. Not an exposé, he's too careful for that, but a detailed explainer on how stool lands management actually works. He walks readers through OASL structure, revenue sharing, the difference between leasing and allocation, and why traditional authorities aren't decorative obstacles but legal stakeholders with veto power. He includes a case study, anonymous, but anyone paying attention can connect the dots. About a development proposal that assumed cooperation could be bought with donations and proximity to political figures. The article gets shared in professional circles, urban planners, legal scholars, NGO networks. It's not viral, but it's credible. And credibility has a way of traveling to the right desks. One of those desks belongs to the Lands Commission, where a director reads Salorm's piece over lunch and makes a note to flag any pending ridge applications for enhanced review. By Wednesday, Kwesi has a problem he can't fix with phone calls. The building permit for Ridgeview Phase 2, which was supposed to be rubber-stamped by now, is suddenly under review pending clarifications on stakeholder consultations. The language is vague, the delay is real, and in construction, delay is money bleeding out faster than you can count it. Kojo sits in on the emergency meeting his father calls with the development team. Engineers, lawyers, the public relations consultant they keep on retainer. Everyone has theories. Market conditions, regulatory changes, someone's competitor spreading rumors. Nobody wants to say what Kojo is thinking. Maybe we earned this. What about community outreach? Kojo suggests quietly. Have we actually talked to the people who live on the ridge, the farmers, the communities around the site? His father looks at him like he just suggested they consult chickens about construction plans. We submitted all required documentation. The OASL knows how to reach us if there are concerns. That's not the same as asking permission, Kojo says. We don't need permission, Kwesi snaps. We need approvals, which we will get once this noise dies down. But noise don't die when it's built on unresolved truth. It amplifies. And somewhere in Adukrom, Amma receives a courtesy call from Mr. Asay, updating her on the pause that nobody officially admits is connected to her future role, but everyone knows isn't a coincidence. Nothing formal yet, he says carefully, but the wheels are turning slower for projects that assumed entitlement over engagement. Amma thanks him, hangs up, and goes back to sorting fabric orders. 3 weeks until Odwira. 3 weeks until she can speak with full authority. 3 weeks for the Sarpongs to keep digging while the ground shifts beneath them. Outside her mother's shop, Accra keeps moving. Trotros honking, vendors calling prices, life happening at street level where reputations are earned slowly and lost fast. The city that mocked her silence is about to learn what that silence was protecting. Not her feelings, her leverage.
Thursday morning starts with a vendor call. The Italian marble supplier for Ridgeview Phase 2 needs payment, not the scheduled installment, but the full balance, immediately. Cash flow concern, they say politely. Market volatility, they explain. What they mean, we've heard things, and we want our money before your project becomes our cautionary tale. Kwesi authorizes the payment through clenched teeth, watching 6 months of carefully managed cash flow compress into one panicked wire transfer. By noon, 3 more calls. The landscaping contractor, the electrical subcontractor, the company that was supposed to install those floor-to-ceiling windows that sold the luxury narrative in the brochures. Everyone suddenly needs adjusted payment terms, which means pay up front or we walk. In construction, confidence is everything. When it cracks, everyone grabs what they can before the collapse. The bank call comes at 2 p.m. Kwesi's relationship manager, the same one who's played golf with him for 5 years, who approved the bridging facility without blinking, wants to discuss risk exposure. Corporate speak for, we're nervous. The facility isn't canceled, not yet, but it's under internal review pending resolution of regulatory uncertainties. Translation, fix your permit problem or we're pulling the plug. Akosua doesn't help. She's on her 3rd charity luncheon of the week, smiling through crab cakes and champagne while her phone buzzes with polite declines. The women's shelter she chairs suddenly has capacity concerns about accepting this year's donation. The Youth Empowerment Foundation that put her on their gala program just sent a note about restructuring our sponsorship tiers to better reflect organizational values. Nobody says it directly. They don't have to.
In Accra's philanthropic circles, reputation is currency, and hers is inflating faster than the CD. Kojo watches it all from his desk, fielding angry calls from contractors while his father barks orders and his mother pretends everything is fine. He sees the pattern his parents refuse to acknowledge. This isn't random bad luck or market conditions. This is coordinated consequence. When you build an empire on perception, perception can destroy you just as easily. We need to pause, Kojo says during an afternoon meeting that's really just his father venting to lawyers who bill by the hour to nod sympathetically. Pause what? Kwesi snaps. Everything. The Ridge Project, the PR campaign, the doubling down. Kojo keeps his voice steady, even as his father's face darkens. Every time we push, something pushes back harder. Can't you see it? What I see, Kwesi says, each word dropping like a gavel, is my son suggesting we surrender to bureaucratic delays and social media nonsense. I'm suggesting we consider why this is happening. I know exactly why it's happening. Competitors, regulators who want envelopes under the table, activists with nothing better to do than complicate development. Kojo almost laughs. Almost. Because his father genuinely believes this, that everyone operates like he does, that resistance must be self-interest wearing a different mask. The possibility that maybe they earned this, that maybe humiliating someone has consequences beyond hurt feelings, doesn't compute in Kwesi Sarpong's worldview. What if, Kojo says carefully, it's about Ama? His mother, who's been scrolling through her phone pretending not to listen, looks up sharply. That girl, Kojo, please, she's irrelevant. Is she? Because from where I'm sitting, everything started falling apart after that wedding. Correlation isn't causation, her father says dismissively, echoing something he probably heard in business school 40 years ago. But Kojo's not wrong, and somewhere deep down, in the part of Kwesi that built an empire by reading rooms and calculating odds, there's an uncomfortable itch of recognition. The timeline is too clean. The precision of it, permits delayed, financing pulled, vendor spooked, social capital evaporating, feels less like coincidence and more like chess moves he didn't see coming. Even if it were about her, Akosua says, trying for reasonableness and landing somewhere near desperate. What could she possibly do? She's nobody. She has no connections, no platform, no patience left for people who underestimate her, Kojo finishes quietly. The meeting ends without resolution, just exhaustion and mounting invoices. Kwesi disappears into his study to make calls to political contacts who, increasingly, don't answer on the first ring. Akosua retreats to her bedroom to rage scroll through social media, looking for proof that people still respect her, still envy her, still see her as anything other than the woman who got it wrong at a wedding and can't admit it. Kojo walks out to his car, the one he'll have to return soon if things keep deteriorating, and sits in the driveway with the engine off, watching Accra's late afternoon light turn everything gold and unforgiving. His phone buzzes. A text from Salom Dake. For your information, Part 2 of the Stool Land series publishes Monday. Thought you might want a heads up. Kojo stares at the message, understanding flooding through him, cold and clear. This isn't over. This is just beginning. And if his family doesn't change course soon, they won't just lose a development deal. They'll lose everything that deal represents. Relevance, respect, and the illusion that money can outrun consequence forever.
The study smells like leather and old success. Awards lining the walls, framed photos with presidents and ministers, a shelf of books nobody reads but everyone notices. Kwesi sits behind his mahogany desk, the same one his father sat behind 40 years ago when the family business was timber, not real estate. When hustling meant something different, but the hunger was the same. It's past midnight. The house is quiet except for the hum of the central air and the sound of Kojo's footsteps approaching down the hall. We need to talk, Kojo says from the doorway. His father doesn't look up from the spreadsheet he's been staring at for an hour. numbers that no longer add up the way they're supposed to. If this is about the Ridge Project, I don't want to hear surrender disguised as strategy. It's about the family, Kojo says, stepping inside uninvited. And what we're willing to destroy to protect an image that's already shattered. Now, Kwasi looks up. His eyes are tired, but still sharp, still capable of cutting through excuses and weakness. Careful, Kojo. You're talking about the legacy that will be yours someday. What legacy? Kojo's voice cracks slightly, months of silence breaking through. A company that treats people like obstacles? A reputation built on humiliating anyone who doesn't fit our definition of worthy? That's not legacy, Dad. That's arrogance with an expensive address. Kwasi stands slowly, deliberately, using heightened presence the way he's used them in negotiations for decades. You think you understand business because you have a degree and a title. You don't. Business is about leverage, about knowing when to press and when to wait, about protecting what's yours. Even when what's yours was never really yours to begin with, Kojo meets his father's gaze without flinching. The ridgeland, the permits we assumed were automatic, the respect we thought we bought with donations and golf games, none of it was ours. We just convinced ourselves it was. We filed every document, Kwasi says, voice rising. We followed every procedure. We followed the letter of the law while ignoring its spirit, Kojo interrupts. We never asked the communities if they wanted luxury condos on their ancestral land. We never considered that maybe tradition matters as much as our profit margins. We just assumed money and connections would smooth everything over. That's how development works, Kojo. That's how cities grow. By bulldozing over people, Kojo shakes his head. By dismissing someone's mother because she sews for a living. By letting mom humiliate a woman publicly because she didn't summer in London. Kwasi's jaw tightens. Your mother was protecting you. From what? From someone who loved me despite knowing exactly who my family is? From someone who had more integrity in her silence than we've shown in all our noise? Kojo's hands are shaking now, adrenaline and truth mixing dangerously. She walked away from me because I didn't defend her, and she was right to do it. So what do you want? Kwasi demands. You want me to apologize to some girl because your feelings got hurt? You want me to abandon a 30 million SETI project because activists are making noise? Tell me, Kojo, what do you actually want? I want us to be people who build instead of take, who ask instead of assume, who understand that real power doesn't come from crushing others, it comes from lifting them up. Kwasi laughs, bitter and tired. That's beautiful sentiment. It also gets you destroyed by people who don't share your values. Maybe, Kojo admits, or maybe it gets you invited to tables that actually matter, not just the ones where everyone's too scared to tell you the truth. He pulls an envelope from his jacket pocket and sets it on the desk. I'm resigning. From the company, from the family business, all of it. The words land like stones in still water. Kwasi stares at the envelope like it's evidence of betrayal. You're walking away. I'm choosing different, Kojo says. There's a difference. If you leave with nothing. No position, no car, no apartment. You understand that. I understand that everything I have right now came at someone else's expense, and I'm tired of being comfortable with that. Kojo turns toward the door, then stops. For what it's worth, I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it because I can't look at myself and pretend we didn't earn what's happening to us. He walks out before his father can respond, past the trophies and certificates and photographs of handshakes that meant everything until they meant nothing. Down the stairs past his mother's room where she's definitely awake and definitely listening but won't come out because confrontation ruins manicures. Out the front door into the compound where his car, the company car, sits waiting. Kojo leaves the keys on the kitchen counter with a note, "Back to you."
Then he calls a taxi, standing outside the gates of the home he grew up in, watching security lights paint everything artificial white. His phone buzzes, a text to Amma that he types slowly, carefully, knowing it might go unread but needing to send it anyway. I'm sorry I didn't stand up when it mattered. I'm sorry it took losing everything to understand what you were protecting by staying silent. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm done being the person who stood there and let it happen. The taxi arrives. Kojo climbs in, gives an address in Adenta, a friend's spare room, nothing fancy, just space, and a chance to figure out who he is without the Sarpong name propping him up. As they drive away from Trisako, away from gated compounds and inherited expectations, Accra looks different, bigger, more real, less like a city he owned, and more like a city he might finally learn to belong to.
The alarm goes off at 5:30 a.m., and Kojo's body doesn't recognize the sound. For 29 years, he woke up when he felt like it, padded downstairs to breakfast already prepared, climbed into cars with drivers who knew his schedule better than he did. Now he shares a 2-bedroom apartment in Identa with his friend Fifi, a quantity surveyor who's been grinding in construction since they graduated. The mattress is thin. The fan rattles. The bathroom is down the hall. It's the most honest place Kojo has ever lived. He found work within a week, not through connections, but through Fifi, who knew a local contractor always looking for project coordinators willing to work for realistic wages. Kofi Mensa Construction doesn't build luxury condos or Ridgeview estates. They build market stalls, affordable housing units, classroom blocks for district assemblies, the kind of work that matters to people who count every CD and need structures that last longer than the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Kojo's first day on site, he shows up in khakis and a polo shirt that cost more than most workers make in a week. His supervisor, a man named Kwame with 30 years of experience and zero patience for pretension, takes one look and says, "You'll ruin those in an hour. Tomorrow, wear something you don't mind destroying." It's the kindest advice anyone's given him in months. By week 2, Kojo has learned more about actual construction than 3 years at Sarpong Properties taught him. He mixes mortar, carries blocks, measures twice because tape measures don't lie the way spreadsheets can. His hands blister, then callous. His back aches. He takes Trotro to site every morning, squeezed between market women and students, breathing exhaust and listening to conversations about school fees and rising food prices. The real economy, not the fantasy version traded over golf and whiskey. Lunch is wakye from a vendor near the site, eaten under a tree with workers who initially treat him with suspicion, rich boy slumming for a story, but gradually accept him when he doesn't quit, doesn't complain, and doesn't pretend he knows more than he does. One afternoon, an older mason named Osi asks him directly, "Why you here? Man like you got options." Kojo considers lying, then doesn't. "I got tired of building things that pushed people out instead of helping them stay." Osi nods slowly, chewing thoughtfully. That's honest, respect. Across the city, Amma maintains her own rhythm. Mornings at the sewing shop, afternoons volunteering at the Women's Empowerment NGO she's worked with for 3 years, teaching financial literacy and small business planning. Evenings are for the Ridge, for consultations with Nana Ya and Uncle Dan, for learning the histories of every parcel, every family, every obligation that comes with the stool she'll inherit in 10 days. She sees Kojo's text the night he sends it, reads it 3 times. Doesn't respond immediately because forgiveness isn't a reaction, it's a process. But something in his words feels different. Not performative apology, but genuine reckoning. She files it away, not dismissing it, just setting it aside until she's ready to decide what it means. Her days are long but purposeful. A customer picks up a dress, pays in installments, thanks her mother with genuine warmth. A young woman at the NGO presents her business plan, a catering service for office lunches, and Amma helps her calculate realistic pricing that won't undervalue her labor. These moments feel small but aren't.
They're the infrastructure of survival that people like the Sarpongs never see because they're too busy building monuments to themselves. Uncle Dan calls her every other day with updates. Salorm's second article published, detailed and damning without naming names, laying out how certain developers bypass community consultation through political connections. Traffic to the piece is steady, shared in professional circles that actually influence policy. The OASL has quietly elevated its review standards. Traditional authorities are being consulted with actual respect, not performative courtesy. Change is slow, but it's happening. People are paying attention, Uncle Dan tells her. 3 weeks after the wedding, Kojo runs into Ama at Makola, not planned, just the chaotic coincidence of a city where 7 million people somehow keep crossing paths. He's picking up materials for a project. She's delivering finished garments to a client 2 stalls over. They see each other across the crowded pathway, and for a moment neither moves. Then Ama nods, not warm, but not hostile. Acknowledgement. Kojo nods back, respecting the boundary, not pushing for conversation he hasn't earned. They go about their business, but later, as Kojo loads cement bags into Fifi's aging truck, he feels something shift. Not forgiveness yet, but possibility. The understanding that rebuilding trust works like construction, slowly, honestly, one solid piece at a time. That evening, Kojo's phone buzzes with a text from Salorm. A bigger story is coming. You'll want to see this. Odwira is next week. Things are about to get very interesting for people who thought they knew the full picture. Kojo reads the message twice, then screenshots it to Fifi, who's become his unlikely mentor in humility and honesty. What do you think he means? Fifi, stirring a pot of noodles on their small stove, just smiles. I think you're about to find out that the woman who walked away from your family had better reasons than anyone guessed, and I think your father's about to learn what real power looks like. Kojo sits on the small balcony, looking out over Adenta's nighttime sprawl, lights flickering like questions waiting to be answered. Whatever's coming, he's not the same person who stood frozen in a ballroom. He's poorer, tireder, and more honest than he's ever been, and for the first time in his life, that feels like progress.
The community hall in Aburi isn't grand. It's functional. Concrete floors, metal chairs arranged in rows, windows open to let the ridge breeze cut through the afternoon heat. But today, it holds more power than any boardroom in Accra. Because today, the people who actually live on the land get to speak about what happens to it.
The stakeholder consultation on ridge developments has been months in the making, organized by the OASL, District Assembly, and traditional authorities. It's the kind of meeting developers usually navigate through proxies and lawyers. Today, they're all here in person. Kwesi Sarpong sits in the third row, flanked by his legal team, looking like a man who's been summoned to court for a crime he didn't know was illegal. Akosu refused to come. "I'm not sitting in some village hall being lectured," she said, which might be the first honest decision she's made in months. Around them, the hall fills with farmers, youth leaders, market women, teachers, small-scale cocoa processors, and elders whose families have worked this land for generations. The divide isn't subtle. Designer suits versus work clothes. Bottled water versus shared thermoses. 2 worlds in one room about to collide over whose vision of the future matters more. The district coordinating director opens with procedural remarks, then hands the floor to representatives from communities adjacent to proposed development sites. A farmer named Kofi Antwi speaks first, holding a folder of documents like evidence. "We're not against development," he says clearly, addressing the room, not performing for cameras. "But we want to know who benefits. Will our children have access to water when boreholes run dry because luxury estates are draining aquifers? Will our roads get fixed, or just the ones leading to gated compounds?" Someone from another development firm tries to interrupt with reassurances. The moderator, a no-nonsense woman from the Lands Commission, shuts it down. "This is listening time. Your turn comes later." A youth leader speaks next, a young man named Kwame who runs a cooperative helping school graduates start farms. Every year we lose more young people to Accra because they can't afford to stay. They can't afford land their own grandparents once farmed. Development that displaces isn't development, it's extraction with better PR. Kwesi shifts uncomfortably. His lawyer whispers something, probably about staying quiet, letting the process play out. But Kwesi is not built for listening when he could be controlling, and his discomfort shows. Then, Amma speaks. She's been sitting quietly in the front section reserved for traditional authority representatives, dressed simply, no performance, just presence. When she stands, Kwesi doesn't recognize her immediately. Why would the girl from Makola be sitting with chiefs and queen mothers? But when she introduces herself, his blood goes cold. I'm Amma Mensa, representing the Queen Mothership pending installment next week. Her voice is steady, practiced, carrying the weight of preparation and purpose. She doesn't look at Kwesi, doesn't single anyone out, she doesn't need to. Stewardship means asking permission, not forgiveness. It means understanding that land isn't just commodity, it's history, it's sustenance, it's the foundation of communities that existed long before any of us drew property lines on maps. When developers approach us with respect, with plans that include community benefit agreements that actually benefit communities, we can build something lasting. When they approach us with assumptions and political connections as substitutes for consent, we say no, firmly and finally. The room is silent, except for a few murmurs of agreement. Kwesi's lawyer is frantically typing notes. Kwesi himself sits frozen, finally understanding what his son tried to tell him, what the delays and withdrawals were signaling. The girl they humiliated at a wedding isn't just connected to the land. She is the land's legal voice. And they never bothered to ask her permission because they never bothered to know who she was. Kojo sits in the back row, having arrived late, dusty from a morning on a construction site. He watches Amma speak with a mix of pride and heartbreak, seeing clearly the woman he lost and the leader she's becoming. When she finishes and sits down, someone asks him, "You know her?" "I used to think I did," Kojo says quietly. "I was wrong." The moderator calls for responses from developers. 2 firms offer thoughtful replies, acknowledging concerns, proposing concrete adjustments. Then it's Kwesi's turn. He stands slowly, buttoning his suit jacket, armor that doesn't fit this room. He starts with his prepared remarks about economic growth and job creation, but they land flat, scripted, disconnected from everything that's been said. Finally, he stops. Just stops mid-sentence, looking at the faces around him. People who aren't impressed by his car, or his connections, or his Trisaco address. People who are measuring him against the simplest standard. Will you listen, or will you take? "I need to reconsider our approach," he says, the words clearly costing him. It's clear we didn't do the necessary work to understand what this community needs. It's not an apology. It's barely an acknowledgement. But it's the first crack in a wall that's been standing for 30 years, and everyone in the room hears it. Outside, after the meeting ends, Akosu watches from her car. She came, after all, sitting in the parking area where she could leave quickly if things got uncomfortable. She sees Amma surrounded by elders, by community members offering respect and consultation. She sees her husband walking to their car like a man who just lost an argument he didn't know he was having. And she sees Kojo standing alone under a tree, watching someone he once thought belonged to him become something far bigger than his small understanding of her ever allowed.
Kojo stands outside his mother's sewing shop on a Tuesday morning, holding nothing but an apology he's rehearsed 100 times and abandoned just as often. The shop smells like fabric and industry, the sewing machine humming its familiar rhythm. Abena looks up when the door opens, her expression unreadable. Not hostile, but not welcoming either. She's been hurt before by people who thought politeness could substitute for principle. She's not easily impressed. "Mrs. Mensa," Kojo begins, and his voice already feels inadequate. "I know I have no right to your time, but I needed to come here and say this to your face, not through a text or a proxy." Abena doesn't tell him to leave. She also doesn't tell him to sit. She just waits, hands folded on the cutting table, giving him exactly the space his words deserve, and no more. "I failed, your daughter," Kojo says, and the simplicity of the truth is almost freeing. "I stood there like furniture. I chose comfort over courage, and Amma paid the price. She deserved better. You both did." He pauses, swallowing hard. "I'm not here to ask forgiveness. I'm here to acknowledge the harm and tell you that I'm trying to become someone who wouldn't make that mistake again." Abena studies him for a long moment, the way you'd examine stitching to see if it'll hold under pressure. "My daughter doesn't need your protection, Mr. Sarpong. She never did. What she needed was partnership, someone who would stand beside her, not behind her or in front of her. Beside her." "I know," Kojo says quietly, "and I wasn't capable of that then. I'm working on becoming capable now." Work is good, but work in your own life. Don't make my daughter your redemption project. She has enough responsibilities without carrying your conscience too. It's the kindest rejection Kojo has ever received, and he accepts it with a nod. "Thank you for hearing me out. And for what it's worth, she raised herself well. That had nothing to do with luck, and everything to do with you." He leaves before the conversation can become anything other than what it needed to be: acknowledgement without expectation, truth without transaction. Outside, Accra moves on. Vendors calling, trotros honking, life happening at a pace that doesn't wait for anyone's personal growth to catch up. 2 days later, Akosua does something she hasn't done in 20 years. She goes somewhere without a plan. She finds Amma at the NGO office, a small space above a pharmacy in Usu, where young women gather for business training and microfinance support. Akosua almost turns back 3 times, her hand on the stairwell railing, pride wrestling with something dangerously close to humility. When she finally enters, Amma looks up from a laptop, her expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Sarpong." "May I have a moment?" Akosua asks, and the fact that she's asking rather than assuming already marks this as different. They step outside to a small balcony overlooking Oxford Street's chaotic traffic. Akosua starts with her prepared speech, something about misunderstandings in different worlds. But halfway through, she stops, hearing how hollow it sounds, how transactional, how much it's still trying to manage the narrative rather than own the truth. "I was cruel to you," she says, stripping away the performance. "At that wedding, I humiliated you and your mother because I was afraid. Afraid that my son was choosing a life I couldn't control, a woman I couldn't mold into my image of what a Sarpong wife should be. I told myself I was protecting him, protecting our family, but really, I was protecting my own insecurity." Amma doesn't rush to fill the silence. She lets it sit, heavy and necessary. "I grew up with nothing," Akosua continues, her voice dropping. "Worked my way up from a village smaller than Adukrom, married a man whose family barely accepted me. I spent 30 years proving I belonged in rooms that didn't want me. And somewhere in that climb, I became the kind of person who keeps others out, the same way I was kept out. I became what I hated." "That's honest," Amma says quietly. "But honesty without change is just confession. What are you actually willing to do differently?" The question lands like a challenge Akosua isn't sure she can meet. "I don't know yet," she admits, "but I'm here. That's a start." "It's a start," Amma agrees. "Not warm, but not dismissive. But only if it doesn't end here. Apologies are easy. Atonement is the work that comes after." Akosua nods, blinking back something that might be tears, or might just be the glare of Oxford Street's sun. She leaves without asking for absolution, which is the wisest thing she's done in months. That same week, Kwasi meets with his board and investors, not to spin or strategize, but to announce a decision that costs him more than money. Sarpong Properties is withdrawing from the Ridgeview Phase 2 development. Not pausing, withdrawing. They'll honor existing community commitments, fund the borehole project they promised but never budgeted for, and establish a scholarship program for students from Ridge communities, administered through the OASL, not through their PR department. This will cost us, one investor says, stating the obvious. Continuing would have cost us more. We lost credibility by assuming we could buy our way past consent. I'd rather lose money than lose the ability to do business with integrity. The words don't come easy. His jaw is tight, his pride bruised. But he says them and he means them because he's finally learned what his son tried to teach him. Some losses are necessary to stop the bleeding. The news doesn't go viral. It doesn't trend. It gets a modest article in the business pages, a few nods from advocacy groups, and quiet respect from people who know how rare it is for developers to actually walk back rather than just rebrand and push forward. The Sarpongs aren't heroes. They're just people finally learning what accountability looks like when you can't outrun it. 3 days before Odwira, Amma receives a formal invitation delivered by Uncle Dan. It's addressed to Kojo, Kwasi, and Akosua Sarpong. You are invited to witness the installment ceremony and festival celebrations, not as guests of honor, but as community members learning what stewardship requires. Amma didn't write the invitation. The elders did, after consultation, as a teaching moment rather than punishment. Because traditions that survive do so by educating, not just excluding. The question now is whether the Sarpongs will show up, and whether they'll come to learn or to be seen.
The drums start before dawn, their rhythm older than the roads that now connect Adukrom to Accra, older than the colonial boundaries that tried to redraw what tradition already mapped. Odwira is here, festival of purification, of renewal, of remembering that land and people are bound by something deeper than deeds and permits. The compound fills with visitors, families returning from cities, elders from neighboring stools, youth in ceremonial cloth, and 3 people from Accra who arrive quietly, without fanfare, because they were invited to witness, not perform. Kojo, Kwesi, and Akosua stand near the back of the gathering space, dressed respectfully but simply. No designer labels today, no entourage, just 3 people whose arrogance brought them here as students of a lesson they should have learned years ago. Around them, the community moves with practiced ease. Women arranging food, men setting up canopies, children darting between adults with the kind of freedom that comes from knowing you belong. The ceremony begins with libation, palm wine poured while the linguist recites the names of ancestors, binding past to present to future in unbroken threads. Amma stands with the Queen Mothers, draped in kente and resolve, her face composed, but her eyes bright with the weight of what comes next. When Nana Ya Nyarko II calls her forward for installment, the crowd quiets, not of obligation but respect, the kind you can't buy, only earn through years of showing up for your people. The rites are not for spectacle. They're functional, binding, legal in ways that predate courts and paperwork. Amma takes her oath in Twi, promising stewardship, justice, and service. She receives the symbols of office, each one carrying responsibilities that will outlive her. When it's complete, when she rises as Nana Amma Mensa I, Queen Mother of the Stool, the applause is warm but measured.
This isn't celebration of power gained, it's acknowledgement of burden accepted. Later, as the festival opens into communal celebration, drumming, dancing, shared meals that stretch across the compound, Amma finds a moment of quiet under the same kola nut tree where Nana Ya once told her that silence was protection. Kojo approaches carefully, maintaining distance that respects boundaries not yet renegotiated. "Congratulations," he says simply. "It suits you. Not the title, the responsibility." Amma studies him, seeing calluses on hands that used to be soft, humility in posture that used to be entitlement. "You look different," she observes. "I am different, or trying to be." He pauses, then adds carefully, "I'm not here to ask for anything, just to bear witness, like the invitation said, and to tell you I'm proud of you, for who you've always been, not who I tried to make you." It's the most honest thing he's ever said to her, and Amma feels something shift. Not forgiveness yet, maybe not ever in the way he once hoped, but acknowledgement that change, real change, deserves recognition. "What are you building now?" she asks. "Affordable housing in Adenta, market stalls near Meadi, small stuff, but stuff that matters to people who need it." He manages a small smile. "Your mother was right. I needed work in my own life, not a redemption project built on someone else's grace." Amma says, "Keep doing that work, not for me, for you, and for the people who deserve better than what your family was offering." They don't hug, don't make promises, just nod. Two people who once meant something to each other, and might, someday, mean something different if he stays consistent and she stays open. But that's tomorrow's question. Today is for the work that got them here. Across the compound, Kwesi sits with Uncle Dan and Mr. Osei, discussing community benefit frameworks for existing Sarpong developments, not as negotiation, but as learning. His company isn't dead, but it's different, smaller, more deliberate. Projects that pass the who benefits test before breaking ground. It's slower, less profitable by old metrics, but sustainable in ways his previous model never was. Akosua helps serve food, awkward at first, her hands uncertain with the task. But the women around her are patient, showing her how, including her not because she apologized, but because she showed up. It's humbling work, the kind that teaches you that dignity isn't about being served, it's about serving with grace. She has years of learning ahead, and for once, she's not running from the classroom. As evening falls and the festival winds into quieter conversations, Salam publishes his final piece in the Stool Land series. Not an exposé, but a reflection on what happened when a family's arrogance met a system that refused to bend. He frames it as a cautionary tale and roadmap. This is what happens when development ignores stewardship. And this is what repair looks like when people choose accountability over ego. The article trends modestly, shared by urbanists and policy advocates who understand that Accra's future depends on learning these lessons before more communities get bulldozed in the name of progress. The Sarpong story becomes teaching material, not to destroy them,
but to show others that consequence exists, and so does the possibility of change if you're willing to do the work. Back in Accra, in the modest Adenta apartment that's become home, Kojo sketches plans for a community center near a market redevelopment site. His company is tiny, just him, Fifi, and 2 recent graduates willing to work for mission over money. The profit margins are slim, the impact is measurable. Every morning, he wakes up tired but purposeful, building things that help people stay instead of pushing them out. Amma returns to her rhythm, NGO work, sewing shop mornings, and now the weight of Stool responsibilities that connect her to every family, every parcel, every decision that shapes the Ridge's future. She's building too, not monuments to ego, but infrastructure of justice, stewardship that asks permission and shares benefits. It's exhausting, exhilarating, and exactly what she was meant for. On a random Tuesday 3 months after Odwira, Amma and Kojo cross paths again at Makala. This time they stop, exchange updates, share a laugh about something small. It's not romance rekindled, maybe it never will be, but it's 2 people who've grown in opposite directions finding common ground in the work they're both committed to. And that, more than any fairy tale ending, feels like the kind of love that builds cities people actually want to live in. The story doesn't end with weddings or revenge or perfect closure. It ends with work, deliberate, unglamorous, necessary work. The Sarpongs didn't get destroyed, they got educated. Amma didn't get vindication, she got authority earned through patience and preparation. And Accra keeps moving, flawed, grinding, beautiful in its chaos, teaching anyone willing to learn that real power isn't about crushing others, it's about lifting everyone towards something better. The glass that shattered in a Kempinski ballroom months ago has been swept away. What remains is the sound of different cups clinking under ridge skies. Enamel, not crystal, shared among people who know that what you build matters less than who you build it for. And somewhere in that truth, between tradition and progress,